Welcome back. Some breaking news now. So let's talk more about those indictments in the case against the Trump Organization. Now, Trump CFO Alan Weisselberg has pleaded not guilty to charges. Prosecutors are alleging a 15-year tax scheme with charges that include 15 felony counts. Now, he's being charged with scheme to defraud, conspiracy, grand larceny, and falsifying business records. Let's bring in Marc Greenberg now. He's a defense attorney and former California federal prosecutor. So, Marc, I want to ask you here about this legal strategy. If it might be effective to go after the CFO of the Trump Organization in the hopes to really net a bigger fish. I'm thinking of former President Trump here.
Well, look, you start out wherever you can find people to prosecute. This is not simply a pawn in some effort, because when you talk about the failure to pay taxes on $1.7 million, unfortunately, I didn't make that much this year, and I still pay my taxes. There's a huge tax gap in this country, and Senator Wyden from Oregon, Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island recently had hearings on May 11th about the tax gap and the need to prosecute people that don't pay the taxes. If he had stolen $1.7 million from a business partner, we'd certainly be outraged, and the prosecutors would be going after them. The fact that you stole the money from the United States government somehow is supposed to be okay because it's just taxes, but it's not. We have a huge tax gap, and while there are certainly other people that will likely be brought into this, you have to start somewhere, and this is where they have the evidence.
So, Marc, we know that Weisselberg has been a loyal soldier, if you will, of the Trump Organization. He's worked for them for decades. He presumably has intimate knowledge of Trump's business dealings. His lawyer said today he is going to fight these charges. Any indication here that he's going to cooperate with this investigation?
Well, every defense lawyer heading to an arraignment on an indictment he hasn't seen is certainly going to say, we're going to fight these charges to the nth degree and enter a plea of not guilty. You always enter a plea of not guilty because you don't even know what the charges are and you don't know what the level of evidence is until you get the discovery material. So everything that's been presented before the grand jury, the testimony, the documents, everything will ultimately be given to defense counsel. That's when they'll start to evaluate what are my client's options.
So, Marc, as we were mentioning, I'll just kind of say it again. You know, he's pleaded not guilty to some of these charges. They do include the scheme to defraud, conspiracy, grand larceny, tax fraud, falsifying business records. Let's just say that he is found not guilty. Let's just jump to the end of this. What kind of jail time could he be facing for some of these 15 felony counts?
Okay, well, I think you misspoke because you said if he were found not guilty. If he is found not guilty, then there's no jail time.
If he's found guilty. I mean, if he's found guilty. He pleaded not guilty, but if he is found guilty, what kind of jail time could he be facing for some of these charges?
You know, it depends on the state sentencing rules and guidelines. So the federal guidelines are quite different and very strict, but you're talking about significant jail time for him. And potentially, you know, there are family members involved in this, and that's where it becomes very difficult for clients if they know that the exposure extends to their family members, their children. They are far more willing to cooperate with law enforcement if that is the case. And it sounds like there may be some issues here because of gifts and benefits to children, to grandchildren that were never claimed as income. To the extent of, you know, a company paying your child's or your grandchild's college education is not a business expense. That is just straight income that would have had to been disclosed to the IRS and to the state tax authorities. So it certainly, you're talking about, in all likelihood, if it's that much money and that span of time, you're talking about years, potential years in jail.
Now, also, besides the CFO pleading not guilty, lawyers for Donald Trump's company pleaded not guilty to these tax crimes. What might this do to President Trump's reelection hopes? You know, he's already seems to be laying the groundwork for another bid for the presidency in 2024. Even if he personally is not culpable or brought up on charges here, how might this impact a possible run?
Well, I'm not a political consultant, so I can't really opine very much on how that would impact. The one important note is that the company, unlike Mr. Weisselberg, the company does not have a Fifth Amendment privilege. And so the documents have to be produced. The documents likely have been produced. They can't withhold evidence based on this Fifth Amendment privilege. And so the exposure of the company is going to be significant, and there's going to be a great deal of information. One of the things that people should understand is the indictment is just a charging document. It's not evidence. It's not admissible in evidence. It is simply a bare bones statement of the criminal charge, and that a grand jury has reviewed sufficient evidence that a crime was committed and that the individual charged committed the crime, or in this case, the individual in the company. So you shouldn't expect to read the indictment and see all the evidence and conclude for yourself guilt or innocence, because it's not going to be there. That is all in the evidence that was provided to the grand jury, witness testimony, documents, hours upon hours of evidence.
Marc, I only have a few more seconds left here with you, but I do want to ask you this, just because the Trump Organization had said, quote, "This is not about justice, it is about politics." This, of course, is after a years-long probe from New York Attorney General and also from the city. Do you think politics at all played a role in this?
I think that as a prosecutor, you take personal offense to people that don't pay taxes, because it's the taxes that pay your salary. So perhaps that's a political angle on it. But no, I think that the prosecutors are looking at this, and they've been looking at it for a very long time, and understand this would have gone through DOJ reviews. A lot of people would have had eyes on this to make sure that it's justified, that the evidence supports the charges, not just the grand jury. But believe me, several people, lots of people in DOJ reviewed this and assured themselves that they can win this case.
All right, Marc Greenberg, defense attorney and former California federal prosecutor, thanks so much for joining us today to break all of that down for us.